Well, every single year it creeps up on you, but the November internationals will be with us before we know it. So welcome back to the channel. It's been a while, a couple of weeks almost, since I last did an upload. That was at the end of the Rugby Championship. And now all eyes are on November and those November series. So welcome back to the channel. In this video, talking about Andy Farrell's Ireland squad, which is interesting. I think in particular, the discussion around where this team is in its development, the lack of continuity, the lack of new faces, the lack of younger faces, all of that stuff. So have your say in the comments. That's probably kind of the headline from it, I think, but give me your views on anything else in the comment section down below. And whilst you're here, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Welcome back. I'm going to be at all of England's games through November, so I'll be covering all of those and trying to cover as much of all the other matches as I can as well, because speaking of Ireland, it's a tough autumn fixture list, isn't it? New Zealand in Chicago, then they got Japan, then Australia, then the Springboks in Dublin. Not easy at all. Springboks in particular as well, because they've got away in France, which I think is going to be a lot of fun. So always some great fixtures. But for Ireland, this is the squad that Andy Farrell has named. And the big headline, as I say, was continuity. Where is the development of this team? What about the age profile of some of these players? In particular, if you're starting to look towards the next World Cup and you're questioning, where is this team going to be? Is it going to be an aging squad by then? Does it need some sort of rejuvenation? Players that aren't there, just so I've mentioned it, Hugo Keenan, Joe McCarthy, Calvin Nash and Cormac Isachukwu are all out injured, and there is cover as well, players that aren't ones that I've listed there, Shane Bolton, and then the uncapped pair of Edwin Edogbo and Brian Gleeson. I think I've said the surname right there. Bolton was capped, I beg your pardon, in the summer. So they could also feature their cover for the game in Chicago. But what about this being an ageing squad? It's a really interesting one, this. So just to give you a few examples, and there are more players you could list here. The next World Cup, Bundee Aki, I think, would be 37, Jamison Gibson Park 35, Jack Conan 35, Tyg Furlong 34. In fact, even you look at some of the other players in that squad, the ones that don't have that many caps, and you could argue that they're not old, but they're not kind of absolute youngsters coming through as well. And I don't know how I feel about this. On the one hand, you look at Ireland's performances, particularly in the Six Nations. Summer tours are always a funny thing in a Lions year for teams from Britain and Ireland, just because you lose such a chunk of your best players. Ireland have obviously done that. There's this real feeling at the moment that Ireland are a team on the decline. That they are a team that we're going to see decline a little bit again this November, that they could have a really tough November. And I totally get where people are coming from with that theory. It makes a lot of sense in a lot of ways. There's still part of me that thinks this squad is going to be okay. And when I talk about the next World Cup and you talk about bringing new blood through, I think some of those players, like I think a Tyg Furlong, for a tight head prop, he has had issues of injuries, but I think the Lions tour exhibited that when he has an opportunity, give him the game time and give him the run to get his body fit, then he's excellent. Jamison Gibson Park is another one that I think could still be operating at a very high level. But I think there are others, Bundee Aki I think being one of them. James Lowe perhaps being another. I think there are other players in that team that you are probably starting to look at and thinking, okay, who's the next players coming through here to be able to pick up the mantle of these guys who have set such a high bar? And why is it that Ireland, who have had really good age group teams, have an incredibly strong schools game, in particular in Dublin, obviously Leinster, who seem to just be a pathway for bringing quality players through. Why is it that they're in this situation? I don't know the answer. One theory, though, that I want your view on is there anything to do with the fact that because Leinster are so dominant, so many of the best players coming through there because they're coming through the school system, but then you've already got the bulk of the Ireland team playing, certainly in all the big games. I know they don't play week in, week out, but when it really matters, those players come back in and play. So does it mean you've almost got all of your talent coming through one pathway, which is kind of Dublin, Leinster, and then into the Ireland team? Are there enough players coming through at Munster, Ulster, at Connacht? Is there enough opportunity for players to come in? I don't know. I was just wondering about it, and I was looking at some of the guys or some of the players in the team and thinking, is it fair that they are kind of breaking through at Leinster when they're in their early 20s, becoming regulars at Leinster when they're in their kind of mid-20s, then by the time they're getting into the Ireland team, they're already in... Do you know what I mean? If the pathway doesn't quite flow as naturally. I don't know, just an idea. Give me your views about that anyway. Let's run through the team, though. Loosehead, Andrew Porter, Paddy McCarthy and Jack Boyle. You suspect that Andrew Porter is still going to be doing a lot of heavy lifting there, having to shoulder a lot of the burden in terms of minutes. Hooker, Dan Sheehan, Gus McCarthy, Ronan Kelleher. With Kelleher and Sheehan, you're absolutely fine. Tighthead, I think, actually looks really strong for Ireland. Tadhg Furlong is just wicked. We know that. Yes, he's coming towards the end of his career, but he's awesome. Finlay Bealham has been around for a long time now and actually was very, very good on the Lions tour as well. And then Thomas Clarkson, everything I hear about him is really positive and really exciting. To me, it feels like on the tighthead side, they're pretty good there. Second row, Thomas Ahern, Ian Henderson, James Ryan, Ryan Baird. Obviously, Joe McCarthy is injured, who, if he was fit, you would back him to start. I know some of these players as well, by the way, could operate in different positions, whether it be a Ryan Baird or whatever, but I put them down just in these categories. Flankers, Nick Timoney, Josh van der Fleer, Tadhg Byrne and Cian Prendergast. The number 8s, Jack Conan. Caelan Doris has returned, obviously having missed the Lions tour due to injury. The scrum half, in fact, I'm going to come back to scrum half and fly halves in just a minute. That, I think, is well worth a bigger discussion. Centres, Bundy Aki, Robbie Henshaw, Stuart McCloskey and Gary Ringrose. The wings, Mac Hansen, James Lowe, Jacob Stockdale, Tommy O'Brien and the fullback, Jamie Osborne. I've put Jamie Osborne at fullback because I know he can play almost across the back line. And I do wonder, actually, talking about the kind of Bundy Aki question, whether Jamie Osborne is going to be the player that does eventually make that 12 shirt his own. But I think we're going to see him a lot of fullback this autumn because of Hugo Keenan's injury. That would be kind of my prediction. But the halfbacks, Craig Casey, Jamison Gibson-Park and Caelan Blade. Fly half, Sam Prendergast, Jack Crowley, Kieran Frawley. For me, and when we talk about the next World Cup and when we talk about where this Ireland team are and their development, what are they going to be like this November? Are they a team on the decline? All of that stuff which I've touched upon already. The biggest questions for them to answer, I think, in terms of that, is what does their halfback development look like this autumn and over the next couple of years? As I've said already, I think Jamison Gibson-Park, I would back him to still be operating at a really high level at the next World Cup. So I like Craig Casey, actually. Can he continue to kick on and be that really reliable number 2? And then fly half in particular, do you go with Jack Crowley, who I like, but does Sam Prendergast have a higher ceiling? Is his potential higher? And so do you invest in him? And in particular, the fly half, in particular, I think Sam Prendergast, I think how good this Ireland team is going to depend on how much he develops, I think, in the next few years. He has bags of talent. There are clearly some holes and some questions in his game from a defensive point of view, but then also I just think in terms of stuff that you have to learn, right? Not many players instinctively know how to run a team and run a test match at international level. I think that is the question mark. For me, if Ireland are able to develop their halfbacks, in particular their number 10, I think they'll be all right heading into the next World Cup. If they don't, then I think some of those fears that other people have or some of the questions they have about this team or where they are or on the decline, I think might be fair. Now, there are other, I think, positions in this team you could talk about because the centres, it's not exactly loads of youth there. I've already spoken about Bundy and I wonder whether he'll start to move on. It's not that he's not a good player anymore. It's more that he is so important to Andy Farrell. I wonder whether Farrell can rely on him in the same way that he has done. We'll wait and see. Maybe I'm totally wrong. But yeah, certainly loads of strength there, but maybe a few more questions as well. And why is it that they don't have absolute bags of youngsters knocking on the door and coming through? Player pool, perhaps. They don't have the player pool of England and France and South Africa. But what do you reckon to my theory, the kind of Leinster theory or the pathway that they're all coming through that pathway and it's almost getting blocked because there's so many good players? Let me know. Give me your views down below. Let me know what you make of this squad. What a brilliant set of autumn fixtures, by the way. I was considering trying to get over to Ireland for the Springbok game because England play on the Sunday, but I'm not sure I'm going to be able to make it work. So I'll be watching from afar, but excited as always to see how this team gets on. And don't forget, the big factor that I haven't really mentioned is Andy Farrell is back in charge after his secondment to the Lions. So loads to look forward to. Give me your views, like the video as well, and hit that subscribe button, subscribe to the channel, and you won't miss a thing. I'll see you in the next one.